Okay, so I'm assuming it's recording. We're gonna go ahead and continue.
Yeah,
All right.
I see. No, it's recording.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. So yeah, the title of this talk is an Agile approach to documentation and training. And again, email me if you want to copy these slides. I believe like the full slide deck with everything I have in there is like about 170 meg. That's why I provide like a shared link to it. And yes, PowerPoint is actually a big aspect of this talk, but you'll see more of the reasonings why. All right. So as mentioned, I coordinate talks for the St. Louis.NET Meetup. So even when it comes to entertaining talks on the Agile space and all that, we have that at the Meetup. So, you know, if you are interested in giving a talk, especially right now virtually, now's a great time to not only give a talk at Agile Meetups, but even developer Meetups. And if you actually come to St. Louis, we'll put you up in a hotel for free, which is kind of cool. So the agenda when it comes to this approach to documentation and training, I'm gonna give you a little bit of a background of what kind of interests me in this aspect. We're gonna look at the problem itself and some possible solutions, actually, not really just the solution. And then we'll have more time for discussion and talk about next steps for you to maybe apply some of these approaches. So as for background, hackingpowerpoint.com, you'll see what that is. nopCommerce, this is actually an e-commerce solution that I'm fairly involved with, and I'll explain how that relates. And just also some discovered opportunity as I have done more of this kind of documentation and training. So back in 2016, for whatever reason, I really liked PowerPoint way back then, probably more than other developers, to where I found these other features that developers really weren't using, to where I started to give a talk on it for developers and try to share, you know, some of these, in a way, hidden features or features that people took for granted. So as I was doing that talk, I would kind of put the live recording out on this YouTube channel, in which hackingpowerpoint.com will take you to that YouTube channel. And also, there's a talk that I gave a little bit later that I pretty much used all of PowerPoint for this process. That has actually gained a lot of popularity. It's kind of propelled how I do more work in this tool and kind of found more of an agile approach to creating documentation and training. So nopCommerce is this open source e-commerce solution based on .NET, and this was the software that I wanted to give more talks and training around when it comes to discovering more of this, you know, what's here. This talk, it's out on YouTube as well. It's on that same channel. If you go to nopjohn.com, that'll take you to that. And what I needed to do was explain this whole architecture within, you know, a talk's time, within an hour's time, you know, where I walk through the application layer, every aspect of the software development. So doing that in a direct way, showing code and things like that, it had to be fairly fluid and direct. And I found that simply doing things in this tool made things a lot easier. So again, if you want to check that out, nopjohn.com will take you to that YouTube video. And again, this whole presentation and all that, just email me and I'll get you a copy of it. So in producing this content, I found myself traveling a lot to give this talk, and it was probably more, not so much because I was so excited about nopCommerce and this software and the presentation itself, but I really enjoyed kind of the feedback on how different developers that knew nothing about this software were able to, in an hour's time, feel like they could actually start coding in it. In other words, some documentation that was very effective was what I wanted to kind of gauge in giving this talk so many times to different developers. Ended up having a really good relationship with the creators of that software, nopCommerce, in which then when I was up in Seattle, they asked for me to basically represent them on Microsoft's Channel 9 channel. So this was actually back in August, to where it's been kind of interesting on how this one presentation has kind of almost been a career changer. And it's really because it's been effective, not because I'm a great person with PowerPoint. It's probably more that I'm probably breaking down the concepts well enough to where it's in a way to where, yes, it's been getting noticed. Also started a recent meetup on that. So the community around nopCommerce, actually I just started this. I think this slide only shows like 21 members, but it's slowly growing. So again, nopCommerce itself for me has been this kind of career changer. So I do consulting in it, I do training in it. Actually, I'd say that's kind of where my focus is right now. I do coaching. It's not so much the nopCommerce software, but I use this software for training software developers in general on looking at good architecture. So where this really applies is in this area of training. And that's where, when it came to, how to really go about that. Here I did this presentation that went really well. And how do I kind of create a lot of content, a lot of training that someone could either read, and try to get educated that way, or they can just sit back and watch. So as an example, like if I was going to look for a nopCommerce training, they have their documentation, which is pretty good. So if we had the specific example on, let's say, how gift cards work in nopCommerce, you have, let's say, the online documentation itself, which is okay. It's probably not enough for a developer, but nonetheless, it's maybe enough for a user. But then there's also random videos out there. Like in this example, there's a video on how to manage gift cards. And when I was thinking about, I really don't want to do documentation and create videos to provide this, kind of immersive just immersive learning experience. So I'm starting to revert back to the tool that I see has a lot of promise. Now, when I was digging in the PowerPoint years ago, I saw the promise of this tool. But now that I'm really trying to apply this and release training around this tool in a way for people to consume, whether they're watching it or wanting to kind of read it almost like a blog post, I'm finding this is kind of like the only tool to be able to really do that. And you'll see some examples here. So like some other aspects, within here, I'm wanting to create content to where I recognize the different types of people that would use this software, such as like a product manager or someone that's just shopping using the storefront, as well as kind of bleed into the technical side for like what a software developer or a DBA might be interested when it comes to the documentation itself. So I'm trying to blend both the user aspect along with the technical aspects within this documentation to where this information in a way could be filtered to where a product manager will see kind of how to use the UI and get more information there, how things are expected to behave, and which would then bleed right into what happens behind the scenes for a developer. So that's what kind of brings me to the problem. So the problem is they're, in the space of trying to find something that you can produce content but effectively consume in multiple ways. I really couldn't find anything out there that was kind of doing the job as I would want it. So I started to think more about even the Agile space and what was out there in tools, and then I really started to find in general, when it comes to just documentation in the Agile space, how it's perceived. And let's kind of dig into that a little bit. So the problem usually simply comes down to, time and value. In other words, there's more emphasis put on usually development than documenting the work. And it really comes down to, I believe, value. So I kind of wanted to dig into this and understand this a little bit more from an Agile perspective to where, I first started to look at the 12 Agile Principles. And, when it comes to absorbing the principles and how those kind of correlated of, why aren't we really kind of getting past this hurdle of, emphasizing, not emphasizing, but just stepping up our game a little bit on how we document our work. And then I kind of went back to the good old original 4 values of the Agile Manifesto. And what kind of grabbed me there was this word over, which I think is misinterpreted by many people, even including myself. And of course, the Agile Manifesto was created back in the days where waterfall was the de facto standard, when it comes to creating software and many other things, to where at the time, I believe this had a strong impact and had really good value, but the word over seems like it gets implied as the word instead of. So like individuals and interactions and over processes and tools sometimes comes across like you don't need processes or tools as long as you focus on the individuals. But I think we have more tools and all that in our toolbox to where the word over, we need to think of these, these four values a little different. So like here, working software over comprehensive documentation. I mean, it feels like, you don't have to document anything nowadays as long as you're delivering the software. And again, this is probably coming from a little bit from a developer's perspective, but nonetheless, I think myself and a lot of others read these values this way, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and then responding to change over following a plan. Now let's kind of look at this a little bit closer because I do still support and enjoy the four values of the Agile Manifesto. I'm not trying to like rewrite it and say this is the way it should be. I understand why it was written this way, but I think there's a way to communicate this a little bit better. So when it comes to individuals and interactions, here's an example of Jeff Bezos to where first off, he was heavily noted a few years back of saying how much he hates PowerPoint and hates presentations, to where he has this standard, and who knows what it is now, but nonetheless, you have to have the 6-page narrative, and you have to read that before you enter the meeting. So you kind of have this little study hall before you actually have the meeting. So I think his point really is about, meetings should be about discussions, not presentations. Now, like here we're having a presentation. Would it have been better for me to, to have everybody just watch this presentation and then we talk about it? Yeah, that would have been actually my preference. I enjoy giving presentations live and all that, but still, meetings are most valuable when you're simply diving right into discussion of things. So, when it comes to the values, individuals and interactions with processes and tools that provide measurable value. Now, this process that Jeff Bezos implemented, I'm sure there's some measurable value there on how the meetings are about discussions and not about presentations. So this, instead of over processes and tools, it should be with processes and tools that provide measurable value. When it comes to working software, over comprehensive documentation. Now, this is kind of a big basis of this talk. So when it comes to documenting software, I mean, we're just putting things in random documents, we're diagramming in video, possibly putting it into a repository like SharePoint. And a lot of us now are using certain solutions, especially wikis, or maybe even Atlassian's Confluence. Those are popular wiki type, or Atlassian Confluence is a popular wiki software. Or we're creating videos. We're actually creating the training videos using Camtasia or Adobe Premiere or something like that. But I also find more and more, the more that the different organizations adopt Agile and different practices, the more so much really what is documentation will go into, let's say, user stories. And there's so much effort getting all that so well defined. However, once that work is done, it's pretty rare that it gets carried forward into some level of documentation that, let's say, a software developer or an analyst or somebody that's trying to get onboarded for that software, they really can't find it. But the effort of documenting the user story or just in general the requirements, there's so much content there that really kind of just disappears as that work gets completed. So just when it comes to thinking about this, working software, it's not over comprehensive documentation, but you need working software with documentation that provides, again, measurable value. What that is exactly, I'm not sure, but it really needs to be worth that time and effort to create it if you're going to do onboarding and things like that, to probably save time for someone to get up to speed on the software. All right, so I'm going to pop through these last ones, but they do apply a little bit. So when it comes through customer collaboration over contract negotiation, when it comes to that contract, in other words, how you're working with the customer, the collaboration and working with Kanban boards and all that, and everybody kind of sharing that same view is crazy valuable, and I'm sure that's, that itself can be measured. But one thing I still have noticed is that when it comes to always having these, end of iteration or end of sprint demos, and are they really kind of communicating what you're expecting? I see a lot of demo fails and things like that, that's understandable. But nonetheless, how can, even with this aspect, how can you get better, valuable feedback without a live demo? What could be done there as well with a better way of, documenting and training as you're creating the software? All right, responding to change. When it comes to having our Kanban boards and setting up sprints and all that, I think a lot of teams that have implemented Agile practices are doing a really good job from what I've seen for the most part. This is a screenshot from Azure DevOps, which I kind of like myself even a little bit more than Jira. Nonetheless, when it comes to responding to change with planning that provides measurable value, we do a lot of this with Kanban boards, but one aspect that I think gets kind of lost is when you're responding to change, there might be some work that you say you're going to do later, or you're not going to do it all, and then maybe a year it comes up, but people have forgotten about it. It seems like there's no place to put the things that you decided to do or postpone. A lot of times the board itself is very limited, for good reason, to be about the work and deliveries at hand. But that flow, that pattern of how you're going to kind of track that other work is, it needs to be clarified of how that's going to be handled. So understanding the problem, I think this is just another way to look at it. I think for today's how we all work, I think this is probably closer to how we work, because a lot of us do need these different tools and all that to be effective. But nonetheless, the values are still an excellent basis to go about all this. All right, the solution. Any questions so far? I'm kind of just flying through this stuff, which I knew I would. I'm assuming not.
I like the way you explain Agile Manifesto. Great, learning.
Good. All right, so let's talk about the solution, or really solutions. And then there's some aspects of PowerPoint itself that I kind of want to highlight, whether you might be aware of them or not, and then how really this tool could evolve as well to make what you do today even better for how you could be shared later. So let's get into this. All right, so in the current solutions, really one tool can't do it all. Not even the tool PowerPoint for sure, but nonetheless, when it comes to the different repositories and all that, it's hard to have that expectation of either go read this or go watch this, and you're going to understand everything about our software because we put so much time into it. Some people simply understand information differently. However, I have seen most teams, including many of the projects I'm on, we use a wiki. There's the Atlassian's Confluence, Azure DevOps, which I always want to call TFS because that's the original name. They have a wiki now built into it, and it by far makes things a heck of a lot easier to start sharing how a platform works. There's a good way to organize content within that wiki as well. Not only that, as you're creating articles, there's this language of Markdown that makes it easier. Actually, software developers, I should say, really like Markdown. I don't know if everybody really likes it, but nonetheless, you kind of have this text way of kind of creating something that'll look pretty good. So I get why wikis are such a go-to on documenting today. And I think that's because there's really no better way to do things nowadays, in my opinion, to where for the time it takes to get that information out of everybody's heads, it seems like it's still a collaborative way to pull that information together. So let's talk about this tool, PowerPoint, of all things. For this tool, you can do a lot of it a lot with it when you put information into it. So there's aspects where all the images and all that of PowerPoint, it could be exported, it could be saved as a PDF. You can even export to a web page with some other add-ins like with iSpring. You can export what you do to a video. So you can record within PowerPoint. This presentation, I can record my voice and everything, and then export what I do in PowerPoint to a video. And the PowerPoint file itself is just a zip file when it comes down to it. This is a standard. A lot of developers, are aware of this, but you can actually just put .zip at the end of it and kind of explore what's inside of there if you really wanted to. And you'll find that, let's say you're recording, a voiceover over your slides. Each one of those slides is actually an audio file that could be kind of pulled together into, say, an MP3. So you can produce content that you can read, listen to, or watch just within this one tool. And I haven't found any other tool at the core level of how you can produce content that provides this in-between aspect to where you can accommodate multiple audiences on how they learn best and how they get up to speed best. So, you can't do this in a wiki article. You would have to go create a video. You can do things creatively, but here you can kind of get your message out in a very structured way, and very structured, but probably in a cleaner way, in a more elegant way, and share it in multiple forms. So that's what kind of intrigued me about this tool, is that there's potential here to take what you create even further. We'll talk more about that. So PowerPoint, the good parts. Actually, I kind of did this section more for developers because so many developers hate PowerPoint, but they're expected to do it, and it just looks bad when developers try to create something in this tool. So let's just start off, death by PowerPoint. And I guess there are some people out there that just do not like this tool, and I get it. And it may not be by a slide that even looks like this so much, but I find that when it comes to death by PowerPoint, or how people see that, or where they really feel that, is when it comes to slides that look like this. Normally there's way too many bullets on there. It's kind of this black and white thing, and it's just exhausting, to kind of even read through something like this. Even when I see PowerPoint presentations presented, I will see, especially if a developer's doing it, they'll just keep PowerPoint open in like a design mode and kind of navigate the slides. So the tool simply, I don't think, is just being used right. So my message for developers, that's why I kind of have this this book up here. There's this very popular book in the developer space called JavaScript, the Good Parts. And until that book came along, a lot of developers did not take JavaScript seriously. So a lot of Java and C# developers like myself would look at JavaScript like, oh, I can just do that really quick and easy because, it's JavaScript and it looks a lot like, Java or C#. So I could just start working in this very easily. Well, after a while, a developer will finally humble themselves and realize in many ways they are different languages. And I kind of feel that way with PowerPoint, where you really should kind of go into this tool as a little bit of a beginner, that there's stuff to learn to really kind of get up to speed a little bit quicker. And don't assume too much that you're just going to have this very quick and easy presentation to put together. I think it takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of understanding that it's okay to be a beginner. I also tell developers, approach this tool like you're approaching your coding. And this could be really for any discipline, but for the software development discipline, you have clean coding concepts. When it comes to unit testing that we're always expected to do, what we're doing is really breaking down our software so it can be tested. When it comes to creating a slide deck, you should break down, that slide deck so it could be understood a little bit more. Customizing your ID, in other words, customizing the tool to where, it kind of benefits you to kind of get work done a little bit faster. Also, this tool cannot do everything for you. There's some other tools and add-ins that definitely make life a lot easier to produce content. And there's the aspect of, as a developer, you are continuously learning, expect that in this tool as well, and respect simplicity. So when you're creating something, the simpler that screen, the better. Even this screen is sometimes too busy for people, to where some people don't like even having titles on their screens and things like that. I guess I'm still maybe a little bit too busy with my slides, but nonetheless, the more simplistic, the better. And to kind of wrap up this aspect for developers, a lot of people originally looked at JavaScript like it was a toy. So they didn't take it that serious. But the people that started to take it serious started to create some amazing things, some very valuable things, obviously, for what we do on the internet today. Same with PowerPoint. if you really kind of look at this tool to where it's not really a toy, but you can produce some content in, and where you can be shared multiple ways in a very agile fashion. We'll talk more about that as well. Then I think you get a lot more value for how you for what you create. All right, so when it comes to JavaScript, the good parts, let's kind of just pop through some of these. I just kind of went ahead and picked my top 10 in a way, and I broke them up into best practices. Some features that allow you to feel like you're kind of taking control better of how you're creating your content, and also some features that make you look like a pro pretty quick, and then I'll share my #1 feature. All right, 3 best practices. 1 concept per slide, that's almost a given now. And you also want to get more familiar with the slide master. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And I recommend using animations and maybe even animated GIFs to maybe explain something complex, and you'll see some examples in that too. So simply 1 concept per slide or transition. So try to use more slides than more bullets. If you're using bullets, which I do in this presentation, it's more for like agenda items or where it's like a punch list kind of thing. Like, I think these are the tasks that we're going to do. Outside of that, I would avoid using any kind of bullets. The slide master. Master the slide master. I think when it comes to kind of getting over the hump, one of the scarier humps, or one of the aspects of PowerPoint that might deter you from wanting to use the tool is because you're not really looking at the slide master itself. In other words, the overall layout of the choices that you have of slides. So when it comes to, you have this master slide and all these different layout slides based upon a template that you might have just selected. There's probably more in there than what you need, to where you can edit this and remove the different slides that you don't want to use. But understanding this aspect of PowerPoint, I think, will help out the most on getting most comfortable with this tool to where you start to apply it more and more. So here, the master slide has multiple layout slides, and that's what your different individual slides are based on. And you can also use a trick to where you can have a layout slide for, like, if there's like a slide that you use over and over, you can make it part of that. A little more on the slide master. You have things called placeholders that you use when you're working with slide masters. That's kind of like basically defined areas for your layout. And then you have objects that are things you cannot modify if you put them on your layout. But of course, you can modify them if you put them on your actual slide. The slide master itself, or the master slide, I should say, that also what controls your, right across all your layout slides, or enabling, like, let's say a footer, a slide number on the different templates. And to wrap this part up, try to keep what you use simple. It's where you don't need so many options. There's a lot of corporate templates you might have to use. I get that, but you might actually want to, if you're kind of creating your own slide deck, pick something that's or create something that's a lot simpler. All right, let's talk about the drawing tools. Now, actually, I see this a lot, to where there will be like a whiteboard meeting.
Wash your face. It sounds.
What's that?
Pizza cheese.
I think somebody doesn't realize they're not on mute.
Oh, you got that, Saeed? You gonna do
That
the
was
mute?
for you, John. Wash your face, please. Just.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're good.
All right. Sorry, let's talk about these drawing tools. So a lot of times when I'm, for different Agile meetups or Agile meetings, we're doing things heavily on a whiteboard and kind of drawing out the whole platform, whatnot. And we find that, here we have this diagram. A lot of times people take a picture of it. They'll put it even to a slide deck, and, you can't really, do much more with it except for look at it. Now, a lot of people then also take it to the next step, where they'll use something like Visio and kind of draw everything out and take that drawing and put it on a slide deck. And maybe in that slide deck, or in that image, you're wanting to, let's say, talk about just this portion of this diagram. So with not much more effort, you really can actually just kind of draw this out so much easier. So if you want to explain, how your different work items are designed in your Agile system, well, you can start with, hey, you got a user story that can have one or more tasks, and a user story could be part of a feature, and that feature is also part of an epic. We also have issues that are a lot like user stories, but those actually fall into different areas within Azure DevOps in this example. It's where user stories are really part of the product backlog. We also have a similar item called bugs that are like user stories that can have tasks associated to them also. So I kind of walked through that as an example of almost the whiteboard effect, to where if someone was drawing this out on the whiteboard, the value is watching somebody draw it out and explain it on the whiteboard rather than seeing the overall diagram in the end. Same here. It's a lot more helpful to see the build of something and then to be able to digest the whole thing after it's presented. And this is a tool where you can do that. You can't do that effectively in other tools to help understand a complex system. Screen recordings. So here's a screen recording. It's really a pretty lame recording. I'm going to pull together kind of quickly of exploring the different templates that are out there for PowerPoint. So you can kind of just pop through some of those. Now, this is a recording that's actually an animated GIF. So it's a picture like any other picture. What's nice about it is that you treat it like a picture. You just drop it in there. You don't have to worry about it playing. It just kind of plays as you're presenting. It just works well. So I kind of recommend that you don't use the built-in videos or audio, or where you can do a screen recording within PowerPoint. They've gotten better, but a lot of times, like a video, if you said automatically play, or it just doesn't work as you expected. So I recommend, actually, unless you have a real good reason why you want to play a video in your presentation, I recommend not using these tools and actually creating animated GIFs as part of what you're trying to communicate and record in a way. A great tool for that is Screen to GIF. It's a free open source tool that I use quite a lot. You pretty much just draw around the area of the screen you want, hit record, and you can even control the location for that, the number of pixels that you want to use.
Hey, John, this is Kim. Have you ever used Snagit software?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Snagit's pretty awesome. It costs money, which is okay. But I found when it comes to animated GIFs, this has kind of done what I wanted. So I've just been kind of using it. And yeah, it's an easy one to recommend. When it comes to screen grab tools, yeah, I know Snagit by far is, when it comes to this aspect, a lot of people use Snagit. There's also a built-in one in Windows. For what I use PicPic. It's free. You can pay for it. That's if you want to get a little more complex. Within PowerPoint nowadays, it's rare that I even use this screen grab tool, because I actually can grab a window within PowerPoint and put it right in, or I can now draw a region. Now, if you look at your title bar within PowerPoint, these icons I'm sure are not there. I just use the screen grab stuff so much that I made it. I actually went through the effort of customizing, this title bar so they're at easy access. So it's pretty nice when you make things so accessible for yourself as you're creating content. But yeah, Snagit, the built-in tool, I can't think of what it has in Windows, and PicPic are also nice.
I think you're talking about Snippet, right?
Snippet, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Yes. Snippet's
Remember,
also.
I'm the BA. I work on all this.
Yes. Yes. Both very popular tools. All right, some take control features. So these are some subtle features that really kind of help you, I think, kind of just feel like you're able to keep track of all these slides. So if I'm saying, hey, don't create more bullet points, create more slides, well, just managing all that content can get kind of crazy. And this is one way of enabling some of these features to make that better. So using sections, showing the selection pane and the animation pane. So in using sections, you can simply right click and anywhere in your slides and add a section that basically kind of provides this outline kind of view of how you can better organize your slide deck. And it's also pretty nice how you can see all the slides in this slide sorter view. So you have it at the navigation side, but then you can go to a slide sorter view and kind of see how things are grouped together. Selection pane. Now, as a developer, I really like this feature, and I think this is what kind of hit it for me. When it comes to getting control of this tool, you go to Home, Arrange, and then you select the selection pane. And on the right-hand side, it'll give you the names of all the different things, all the different objects that are on the screen. You can rename those. And you just kind of, as a software developer, having this level of, sometimes I'm not clicking on it right, but if I can control it in a way to where, I can just show things and click on it as if I'm almost developing software. I don't know, I really like this aspect. I turn this on all the time. And the animation pane. Now, when you first think of doing animations, you feel like it's too much, or, why would I want to do that? But an animation is really like, this little highlight that just occurred. And as I was doing this slide, I had the animation pane on, and not only am I seeing all the animations in the animation pane, but it also shows in the slide itself all these different number indicators of what those represent. So unless you turn on the animation pane, you can't actually see over your slide deck those animations. Also, when you, again, showing that selection pane, when you have a complicated slide like this, to where you might have different objects grouped with inside themselves, it's sometimes really hard to click inside one of those groupings to select one of those objects. And giving that selection pane makes life a lot easier. And again, having the different sections, there's this new feature called Zoom in PowerPoint, to where you almost get the Prezi effect now if you want to create a slide that way. Prezi is this way of kind of giving this, where you can do a big map of something, and you can click on that and then jump to either a slide or a section, and kind of just have it go through those one or more slides in the section, and then it goes right back where it left off. So that's outside of just organizing your slides. You might find implementing the feature of Zoom within your slide deck might be of value. All right, so 3 features that help you look like a pro. There's Morph. A lot more people are becoming aware of this feature. It's kind of a new one, came out with 2016. SmartArt, it's been around for a while, but I probably use this a little too much. And also there's the different storyboarding tools when it comes to designing software and kind of working through requirements. These are some great tools to consider that are free. All right, so Morph. So for example, you have where if I was going to show you how to use Morph, I'd say you go to Transitions tab, then you select Morph for that slide that you're on, and then you can also preview what that looks like. Whoops, wrong key. You can also preview what that looks like by going to the preview button. Now, all that did was bounce across 3 different slides. In other words, I kind of copy pasted the first slide after I drew the original blue box around things, and I just moved it. So by having this Morph transition, you got this nice fluid feel of something getting focus. Something that was really hard to do prior to this feature being available. You had to do like animation paths and motion paths. It was pretty difficult, actually. Using SmartArt. Now, this is a really nice, easy way. You've probably already seen some examples in this presentation of this, where you can just take a bullet list and convert it to graphics, basically, SmartArt. The way this is done is that, for that particular bullet list, you can go from the Home tab, you got the Convert to SmartArt, and what's nice is that you can just kind of hover over the different options to see what it would originally do. Once you select one of these particular graphics, you can also right-click on it and just modify the bullets to where it'll fix the graphics for you. So you can edit something after you select one of these choices. So this has been, and you can also then treat it like a graphic as well after that, if you wanted to go that way. You can use SmartArt for a hierarchical list. So if you have a hierarchical list like this is one of the examples of using SmartArt and the results of that hierarchical list. Storyboarding. Now, this was an add-in that you had to pay for if you were a developer that had the highest level of the Visual Studio or MSDN subscription. It is now free, which is awesome. It should have been free from day one. Another tool that's out there that's popular is Balsamiq. So Balsamiq.
Oh, I love it. Balsamiq.
Yes, a lot of people do love Balsamiq.
Great.
to where you can kind of mock up, different UIs, and it gives this kind of sketch kind of feel, which a lot of people absolutely love that sketch kind of aspect. So that way the client doesn't think that the software's done, that they don't think they're screenshots.
Well, you can go
Nonetheless,
to sketch mode and then wireframe in one setting. Yeah.
So it's some pretty cool stuff. There is, when it comes to PowerPoint, you can actually have this once you install the add-in. You got the storyboard and you got the storyboard shapes, and then most likely you're going to create a blank slide, and you just change the layout of that. And then from there, you got the different window types. If you put a browser window on there, and then you could take a control like a breadcrumb control, throw it on there. And if you look on the right-hand side of where you got the selections, you really just see that they're shapes that someone else has really predefined. And when it comes to you could actually create your own shapes if you want to and import them in. And yeah, it's a really good way if you don't have something like Balsamiq to start sharing a design and working through things. As a matter of fact, on a team we actually use the storyboard shapes, and then once the actual product was kind of getting closer, we would actually replace the storyboard shapes with actual screenshots, and that way we kind of had more of a fluid documentation going on. When it comes to installing the storyboard, I recommend this video because it does point you, it's a little more updated, it points you exactly where you want to download the free add-in. And then there was also a video by the same person that put this one out there, to where you could also download more free storyboard assets. So those are definitely worth checking out if you want to apply the different storyboard pieces.
Hey, John, I know you're promoting
Yes.
PowerPoint primarily, but have you ever used the Balsamiq cloud version where you can make edits and then do collaboration with the UI?
Well, I haven't, but I think it's probably more because the other values around PowerPoint outside of the storyboarding, that's why I've kind of been so driven in this tool. That's been useful. So again, I'm just letting this animated GIF go by of other storyboarding things that you could actually purchase, whatnot. But nonetheless, Balsamiq is awesome. It's hard to get the whole team, from my experience, to be sold on using that tool. I found PowerPoint as a tool to where both would be okay with editing that content. And again, the big feature, I think, is my next one. Yes, my number one feature. This is why when it comes to wikis, Balsamiq, and all these other actually what are really awesome tools for what they do, at the end, they can't do this. And that is, how can I have this content, these whether it's a walkthrough of what you would do in Balsamiq, how can I do that in a way to where I can record something, but it's not like I'm recording a video like we're doing right now, but do this in a very easy way. So let's look at some of this. So when I was giving this presentation back in 2016, I thought it would be cool to record the presentation to kind of prove the value of the tool as I was giving it live. So for what I put out there on hackingpowerpoint.com are the actual live recordings of where I have given that talk. And I would just put it up on YouTube. And I don't really recommend using PowerPoint for something like we're doing right now, because when you're recording within PowerPoint, you really can't go back slides, and you'll see why in a second, but you can't really bounce around the presentation effectively. So you're better off recording through something like we're doing right now when giving a presentation. But when it comes to producing content, it's a lot easier to do an audio recording rather than recording yourself on a video. And you don't have to worry about so much editing and things like that, which, these tools like Camtasia is an extremely popular tool to do something like this. It's just not that, it takes more of an effort. So these are some old screenshots, but this is what's really nice, is that you can just start recording your presentation, and as you're recording, you can also record not only audio, but if you want to record your like laser pointer effects and other aspects, you can enable those. So basically per slide, as you're recording, it'll put an audio clip on that slide. Now, this kind of gives a feel that you're not editing a video. If you screw up on a voiceover, well, you kind of just redo that slide or redo all the slides, your choice. But it's kind of, as a matter of fact, it's even easier. There's actually a new view to the recorder that it's, I wouldn't say it's better, but it's different. But nonetheless, you're able to record these audio clips per slides, which also records that timing of how long you're speaking on that slide. And at the end, you could just export that to a video, or you can upload to YouTube like I did in the other examples, or someone could simply take that PowerPoint presentation and just press play and get all your audio clips. If you're modifying content, like something changed, let's say in this software for how this behaves, well, then not only do you just change the slides, but you just change the audio on those particular slides. You don't have to re-record everything or do like a video edit or anything like that. And that's why I kind of see so much more potential in creating content with a tool like this. It just there's other slide tools out there like Keynote and Google Slides. So it's not so much, that I like a presentation tool. It's just that I like how it's able to help break down the problem of not only what you're trying to communicate, but how you're trying to communicate with video and audio. I found it to be this really nice all-in-one thing that you can deliver and modify with not a lot of effort. And that's part of the, agile mindset is where you can, have, in many ways, you should have documentation as part of your flow. However, I see most of the flow is let's have all these user stories and documentation comes later, if at all. There needs to be something that kind of pulls this together a little bit more. All right, so PowerPoint, the possible evolution. Let's kind of talk about some of this as we wrap this up. So I kind of have kind of harped on this a little bit to where you have this this format that's really crazy flexible under the covers, and you can do quite a bit with it. If we look inside that format, this may or not be hard to see, I'm not really sure, but here, if you take one of these slide decks and put a .zip at the end of it, you can then explore it and see the contents of that particular PowerPoint file, which is really just a zip file, and it's mostly text-based. Otherwise, you're going to see different images and things like that in there. Let's see, like here in media, you'll have all the different images. This is an example of a different PowerPoint show, as well as all the audio clips. So all those audio clips could kind of be pulled out and combined together in an MP3 of sorts. So this is this is the standard of PowerPoint's OpenXML, which is the same standard per se that like Word and Excel use as well. But what's awesome about this is that there's no reason you can't take that format and kind of translate it more to a browser type, browser friendly type format. So when it comes to HTML and CSS and JavaScript, anything and everything you do in PowerPoint can be replicated in the web browser. Now, Microsoft has done some of this with even like how you view something in SharePoint. You even look at Google Slides, they're pretty much flat out doing all that in the browser. So when it comes to this translation of how you can do things like the animations, doing something like that in this kind of tool versus doing that and, manually doing that in HTML, CSS and all that, it, just doesn't make sense for someone that's not a developer to kind of go down that route. So what's nice is that the possibilities with this format, you could, for example, I watch a lot of Pluralsight, and when I look at something like Pluralsight, I'm looking at this like, you could actually almost generate this page and do everything in PowerPoint just because of how things are structured in just the one file. You could have, something that can produce some pretty cool output. Here's one of my, I would say, it's not a pet peeve, but let's kind of look at this other example to where this is an article. You see a lot of blog posts written this way now, to where it's this ever long scrolling article, that you kind of keep going through, and you see text, image, text, and then we saw an animated image for a while, which is just an animated GIF like you're doing in PowerPoint. and then text, image, and so on. So even something like this, to where let's say you have that content within the notes area, this could even be, in effect, generated from a PowerPoint file. Then when it comes to really getting a good sense what you can do with HTML and CSS, I came across this example recently on a Pluralsight course, but nonetheless, this is just purely CSS animations and kind of showing on scroll how you're able to control content. So how animation is getting triggered just as you're scrolling through something. So picture those long scrolling articles where you're just kind of scrolling away, and you're kind of just making things happen. You have that level of control to have this kind of output, which is pretty cool. So again, this is mostly CSS, actually, not even a lot of JavaScript making this happen. It's just how how powerful the browsers are today to do something like this. Yes, and the scroll bar, and yeah, I forgot the so the one aspect of this is that, man, if I'm looking at like a blog post or something like that, you could even put in ways of where you could just press play and then it'll pick up and in a way start reading to you what's going on. So there's so much potential with this format to really kind of pull together the way different people learn. So as I'm working through this, this is something I'm trying to produce. I'm also kind of working on something in the open source space where it would take a PowerPoint presentation that will give you that effect, to where you can have something that you can read, listen to, or watch. So yeah, you may want to have me back in about 6 months to a year to see where that comes together. All right, so next up is really just a discussion. If you have any questions. Some things I did not touch on, but have evolved a lot, is that the file merge capabilities have really gotten a lot better. You got commenting you can do on a slide deck. When it comes to that real-time collaboration, it's not as good as, let's say, Google Slides if you're collaborating on one particular presentation, but it's pretty doggone good for how far they've come, to where if you're sharing a presentation over OneDrive or even some of the other ones accommodate this, it's pretty nice, where you can have multiple people working in the same file.
Great sharing, John. I really learned a lot new cool features. Even I didn't know that.
Well, good. So yes, email me if you want to copy this presentation. I'm probably going to put it out on that same, if this recording goes well, I'm going to put it out on that same hackingpowerpoint.com channel. If I could find the password to put it out there. Nonetheless, I'm going to try to put it out there. I was even thinking about, I have a URL called agileSlides.com. I might have that URL go directly to this recording because I'm not sure how much I'm going to give this presentation. I just wanted to kind of do this and see what the, what the feedback is in general. So yes, reach out to me if you want a copy of this slide deck or any other slide deck examples that you saw. And I highly recommend, you find your example and apply maybe what you discovered here or what other things you discover. And the best way to see if you're on the right track is to share what you're doing. Even feel free to share with me. Say, hey, does this look good? Is this kind of what you're saying? I'm totally open to that too.
I like the layering effect where you can add or remove by role type.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me was a good highlight. But to be honest with you, I don't think personally I would go in and use PowerPoint for all the options that you had.
Right. Actually, that's what I would love to hear.
Yeah.
When it comes to, do you have that challenge of documenting projects?
I mean, yes.
How well is your documentation?
Well, I kind of thought that, and this was still of value. I'm still going to look into some of the features that I would pick to use for PowerPoint. But to me, I work as a BA, so I have the struggle of everybody is still in the waterfall methodology where their default is to always want documentation instead of being able to develop with iterations and collaboration with your business partners.
Right.
So for me, it's to start streamlining and removing all the heavy documentation, because by the time you develop it or you present it, it's already outdated.
Yes, and that is a big problem for sure. So
and
like when it comes to onboarding new people on software, how long does that usually take?
Say that again?
If you're like, let's say you got a new team member, whether they're a BA or a developer, how long is your onboarding usually?
Well, I'll also say this. So I'm a business analyst. I don't think I've ever really been onboarded a day in my life. It's kind of like, hey, here you are. Here's your laptop. Go.
Yes, yeah, on a BA side, yes, you get punished a lot more. That's
Yeah,
true.
you know, so I don't have the luxury of being onboarded, but if I do documentation for like the users, you know, the stakeholders and such, it just depends on what they're looking for. Obviously, you want to have the highlighted features of the software documented that are going to be kind of static or stay the same. That's
Yeah.
where you invest your time. And then, you know, when you're doing the development work, to me, it's making sure you're getting feedback on an ongoing basis so that
Yeah.
everybody's aware, the dev team, the stakeholders, and the BA, you know, together.
So one experience I'll share with you that I wish I could share this exact present other work I did, but it was for a company. And I've done this a couple times for other companies. But one really stands out for me to where I was a developer on the team. And the onboarding even was expected to where you're not going to really be able to work on any work items for like, let's say a couple weeks. And that's the easy ones. But you really don't get to know, let's say, the platform for, you know, you're measured in months as for someone that can be someone that can do this. Now, it wasn't so much that like, let's say this platform that, yeah, it did take me, you know, weeks and or months to really get comfortable with things. But once it was communicated and also communicated in a way of like, here's what the user sees and here's how the back end works for how the software works. Because a lot of times we're writing software nowadays, there's no visibility. It's a web service or something like that, that is kind of like magic of what's going on behind the scenes. I did something like this, where I kind of blended the user flow of things with the developer. And we brought on 2 new developers and they were onboarded within the first week. And we were giving them work items, big ones. So it's, again, it's the value of like, if you have a lot of turnover or, you know, if you're really having a hard time just communicating, you know, how is something supposed to work instead of having so many in-person meetings and things like that. Here's this other option, I guess, is what I'm kind of putting out there, that, you know, not only you kind of use the tool for what it is and how you can break down the content, but you can record your voice. Some people simply, you know, to avoid those meetings, you could have something that someone can press play on and make better too. If there's certain slides that are not really coming across well or changed simply because the system changed, the effort of changing things is not that bad. Also, it's version controlled in most systems too now, like OneDrive.
Don't talk to me like that. No, this
I
is
understand.
great. Thank you so much for your time. You've been a pleasure. I'll definitely dive in. I'll email you with some questions and such as well.
Sounds great. Is there any other questions? I appreciate the honesty by far, by far.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John, for
Thanks,
having
everyone.
us.
All right, Saeed, have a great night. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Take
All right.
care.